So this is looking a little bit different. Um, this time that we usually spend using telling messages and teaching, for the next couple of weeks, we're going to spend time to give you all insight into what we're up to. Typically, every year during the fall, we like to give some sort of visioning series. Last year, we did it right in the beginning of September. The year before, we did it right in September, but given the season of elections, we thought the Beatitudes were really important to kind of put in the beginning of the fall. But we did want to bring you all into the conversation of what we're up to as a church. There are two things that I like to do in this time. One is really give a spirit of engagement so that you all know what's happening, where we're at, what we're trying to do, and transparency. So that we pull back the curtain completely and go like, this is what is happening. If you have questions at any point in time, we want to answer them. We want to be really prudent about having conversation. This has been especially true as we've moved now twice in the last 2 years. We wanted to be really transparent about the whole process from moving out of the Delavan Theater into the community park, and then what happened after we had to leave community park and come here. We really wanted to embrace the spirit of transparency and engagement to say, hey, what do you guys think? What do you see us doing going forward? Because this is not Rachel and my church. This is not our worship team's church. This is your church. This is our church, and we're together in this. So that's really important in why we're doing what we're doing. We're going to pull this back a little bit, and in the next couple of weeks, we're going to have a conversation about why and how we do what we're doing, and we want to have a conversation between us as a team. Next week, you're going to see Sean and Tony come up and kind of talk about the ins and outs of what we do during our worship gathering time. But today, we're going to talk about a little bit of what we do on Sundays in general. So what you're about to see, I need to give you a caveat. What you're about to see literally is scripted out because that's how Rachel and I do best. Next week, it won't be scripted out because that's just not how we'll do in that conversation. But we literally, I need you to know this, we literally have these conversations like 2 times a week in a really similar format that you're going to see. This like kind of building on each other and going. One of the things I appreciate the most about Rachel's partnership is that we do things really similarly. We write things out really similarly. And when we had this conversation Monday, I wasn't so great because I was like off in La La Land. And Thursday, it was like Rachel sat down and started taking notes. I go, thank you, Jesus, for putting Rachel on my team to be able to make this happen. So what you're going to see is a real conversation that we have had, maybe a little bit scripted, but really what it gets down to is this is how we do our conversations. Like I said, probably
table's just a lot bigger.
hours a week we spend doing this. So, Rachel, go ahead.
All right. Well, as Pastor Zach said, over the past several months, and really since we began our transition to Community Park, the leadership team and the staff were really praying over and talking about our core values. And our core values are: we believe in the sovereignty of God. We strive to love others well. And we want to join God in his mission in our community. And it's really great to have core values, but we have been looking at them with a very specific focus, and not just how our core values are lived out here on our Sunday gathering experience, but deeper than that, like how are they evident in us as a body, as individuals, when we leave this space and we go about the rest of our week. We have been deeply impacted by the thought that our Sunday gatherings can easily become an experience that really is just set up to benefit the people here in this space. And that really led us to ask a difficult question: is the Sunday morning experience all that we are really called to do? Because our faith walk, as we all know, doesn't just happen on Sunday. Yet if that's where all of our resources are, where our time and our energy, our talent, our finances are spent being poured into, what happens to the rest of the week? So this caused us to look at what we do on Sunday really from a different perspective. It is our desire that everything that happens inside of this space, each and every part of it, is an act of worship that points back to God. But how we practice that has the ability to transform us in such a way that we can't help but carry that with us the rest of the week. So that really is the focus of these next 2 weeks, taking a closer look at why, as the River Church, do we do what we do? Why do we serve? Why do we gather the way that we gather? Why do we practice what we practice? And what does it truly mean to build community, not just within this space, but beyond these walls? Because what happens on Sunday, it cannot be enough. As lovely as this time is that we get to spend together, this time is also designed to help equip us to be who we've been called to be, to the greater community, not just within this intimate community. And that is, of course, the community that we live and we breathe in Monday through Saturday.
Yeah. So we have wrestled in our office often with these questions, and then coronavirus happened, and then this conversation began like moving faster and getting more intense to the point where Rachel and I had fairly intense conversations about what are we supposed to be doing, and that it's caused us to think these are really hard questions that we just aren't the only ones who have to wrestle with. It's something that we have to bring to on Sunday. We have to bring you into the conversation because this is not something that we can just prescribe for you and you take and all of a sudden you're able to do church and be the church. But all of us together have to come to this, that when we show up on Sunday, it's not that we want to do something for you, but we want you to participate in something greater. And that's the question that we'll start with this morning, and a question that I'll pose for all of you, is that all of you are here for a reason. And you don't have to share. Certainly we will share why we come on Sundays, but generally speaking, if you just want to raise your hand or just shout out, and we'll do our best online. And DJ, if you want to just pay attention to Facebook and pose this question out on Facebook, why do you come to church on Sundays? Just as simple as that. Why do you come to church? What is it that brings you to church on Sunday? Fellowship? To worship, yeah. I know, it's really hard. Yeah, Barry. Yeah, Barry says, Barry, I love your heart. Barry says to pray for people to get better when they're sick. And he noted weddings, just a general sense of love. I think that's really great, Barry. To be Jonathan says, to be challenged to be better than we are. To hear a great sermon, well, that's... Oh, good. Anything else? Any other reason that brings you on Sundays? Yeah. Listen to the songs, yeah. Thank you, Rhonda. I appreciate that. Yeah, Sean just gave out a little, hey. Any other reason? Yeah, that's important. Dave says it's one of the things that the Lord calls us to do as a body. I believe what you said. um, yeah, please. Yeah. Mm, yeah. Joanne says that to break bread together, to remember the sacrifice that Jesus made on our behalf. Um, yeah, I think that's really important. I mean, and we'll talk more about that next week, but it's the reason why we centralize the table in our worship space. Mm. So Mark states to refuel so that we can kind of gear up to be the church, or as he says, to be the light in the world. Anyone else? I don't want to shortchange anyone. Anything on Facebook? You see any? Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot that I really love about this time that we have together, and so much of it is already represented in the things that you guys have said. I really like the faces that I get to see and being able to quiet my heart and recharge, like Mark said. But something that I really do love to see is my kids serving and developing servants' hearts. And oh, that makes me emotional. Um, but really, it's just also the anticipation of what God is going to do in this space, because He is always at work and He is always waiting for us to turn to Him. And I have to believe He's excited, when we prepare ourselves to be in His presence. All of these things are just very near and dear to my heart. But in saying that, if I'm not completely transparent or, careful about my intent in coming on Sunday, it can easily become an experience for me to feel like, what am I going to get out of it? What do I get to receive today? And what happens if something during the service doesn't click with me? Maybe the whole service seems completely off. I don't know if you guys have ever felt that way. Maybe I'm alone in that, and that is okay. But the worship component of the service is like my favorite part. And I like to sing. However, it's not my gift.
You don't sing enough, in my opinion.
Well, that's in the eye
It's
of
not written
whatever.
in the script, but it's true.
Yeah, that threw me. That wasn't there.
That's true.
No. But I do love to sing, and I have a very select range I can sing in because I'm limited in that area.
I want to hear more of it.
And so what happens if none of the songs are in my range, And I'm just like, oh, I didn't really get to engage. And I'm going to be honest, I've left thinking that way. Like, oh, did the whole worship experience just get blown because I couldn't really sing? And that is really just me looking at what I'm going to receive from the experience. And it sounds silly, but it's true sometimes. Maybe the message isn't what you wanted to hear or from who you prefer to hear it from. But also what happens if we cannot experience the service in the way that we have been accustomed to experiencing it? What happens then? And we've learned very quickly when March rolled around that, what we knew can be removed from us virtually overnight. So if Sunday is set up simply for us to receive, where is the focus in that? I mean, the focus really is inward. And it's easy for the focus to be here because we know what we come carrying. We know maybe, the burden that we're feeling or the heartache that we're feeling. And it's easy to be focused on that. And, to some degree, that is okay. I mean, that is okay. But if it stays there, that's kind of where the problem happens.
Yeah, so I come out of a more traditional church background where organ, liturgical sense, and I don't know, 6, 7 years ago, I remember thinking, like, is there more to this than what we're experiencing on Sundays? Which that question led me to go to seminary, um, a completely different style of seminary than the churches that I grew up in, to experience very different ways of worship, ways of gathering on Sundays. And I said, why does it have to look the same? Does it have to be this, or is there something more? And that question ultimately has led me, well, 3 years ago, it led me here, because if you haven't noticed by now, I am, in my opinion, a holy agitator. I like to challenge the status quo because my point is that there's a lot that doesn't make sense about how the church has been done or how the church is continuing to do what it is and focusing on particular things that at the end of the day, you read the Gospels and you go like, while it is what Dave says is important, while it is a mandate for us as the body to gather together to worship in a really similar way that we do, there's more to it than that. And my holy agitatorness shows up and goes, I'm reading the Gospels, and there's something different about what I read than what we're actually doing as a church. So that's why we sit here. That's the conversations that Rachel and I have. Because when we read the Gospels, specifically when we read things like the Beatitudes that go like, you have to be emptied, and only when you're emptied can you be filled, and not by the things of this world, by Jesus, that is a big challenge to me to say, like, if we're not paying attention to that, if we're not striving toward doing that on Sundays, how are we going to be able to do it any other time of the week? So what Rachel is saying really resonates for me. That if it's about the inward self, if Sunday morning is about the inward self, this is my holy agitatorness, I think we should pack it up because it's not good enough. Read the Beatitudes, read the Sermon on the Mount, and understand that, like, just gathering isn't good enough. It's important, yes. But what if we were to put our values and our practices into play, not just on Sundays, but what if they played out in our real life? Because I believe deep down that this is our call, that we are not just called to be people who join together on Sundays for an hour and a half, and then we get to go about and do our lives. Like, no, because of who Jesus is and because of what Jesus done, our life is different. Sunday morning is just a place for us to say, yeah, it's different. Let's go be different with our
differentness.
With people that we work with people that we hang out with on Sundays in this space, or, to be honest, we're called to be the church, be Jesus' hands and feet for the people who live next door to us who do not share the same faith. And this is so vitally important for this conversation, because when the beginning of the pandemic, we hit this and we were like, what are we supposed to do? And all the while, I'll pull back the curtain a little bit, Rachel and I have been wrestling back and forth to say, like, what is Rachel's role in this? Because what you all hired Rachel to do 5, 6 years ago, was it 5 or 6 years ago?
Almost 6, yeah.
What you hired her to do, that job doesn't exist anymore. And we'll go, like, as you've been able to see, Rachel has skills beyond anything that was been asked of her 6 years ago. We're trying to figure that out, and a conversation that we had really started to go, this is Rachel's role going forward. I don't know if you can speak to that, Rachel.
Sure. Like Pastor Zach said, we as staff, we had a Monday morning meeting. Tony was in that, Kate was in that, and we had been gathering together for quite some time in the old theater office as we were preparing to transition to Community Park. And it was heavy on our hearts at that time how we were going to, I guess, be different is the way to say it. But you've heard us say things like, it isn't about us. It can't be about us. And we've done series, where that theme was a part of, the series that we chose to do. But it's one thing to say that, but it's another thing when you are actually plopped in the middle of having to do it. And as someone tasked with connecting people, I mean, Zach and I have had a lot of conversations, a lot of hard conversations about, how do you connect people when you are not gathering together to connect? And that weighed so heavy on my heart, I can't even tell you. And I did share a little bit about this during the annual meeting, but something that I really enjoy doing is baking. And I have not done that for a very long time, but when the stay-at-home order was put in effect in the spring, I just instinctually started baking again. And I had to dust off a lot of my things because they hadn't been used in some time. But I was realizing that the way that I was showing love to people around me was by making homemade bread or making brownies or whatever it was and delivering it to people's doors. And one day I was standing in my backyard with our dog Wilson, and it just struck me as I was looking at the houses around me, I really felt like I knew our neighbors. And we had had conversations just in the backyard or over the fence or across the street, whatever it may be. But just this thought just was overwhelming to me is, do they feel known by you? And it's one thing to have a conversation, but it's an entirely different thing to be known by someone. And it really made me think about what happens as a church when we can't gather the way that we have been used to gathering, where we're expecting people who maybe want to know something about Jesus to take the initiative to come and join us and experience that here. That's asking a lot of people, quite honestly. Where maybe going to church in the middle of a really hard time in your life or in your nation is the last thing that you're thinking of. So how are we the hands and feet of Jesus? And I don't mean that in the corny, like, you're called to be the hands and feet of Jesus. I mean, I think we've heard that so many times in our lives, but really, how are we doing that if we can't gather the way that we are used to gathering? Or not even, if we can gather, how are we loving our neighbors the way that Jesus would? Not with the expectation, though, that they're going to come and join us on Sunday. We're loving them just for who they are as they are. And that really began this churning in my mind of what does connection look like outside of this space.
That's so important. What does it look like to connect to people outside this space? Because everything that we do matters. Every conversation that we have as people of faith matters. You don't have to explicitly be like, this is Jesus, you need to... But the way you talk, the way you act, the way you love people, it all matters. I've shared this before in some sermon, but as a high school student, I was in a theater class. And the teacher was really clear. She said, every single time that you're on stage, every single move that you make it with intention. Don't just do something because you want to do it. Do it because it leads to something else. And that's really resonated with me. Do everything with intention. Everything that you do should have a purpose, which is it's a mantra for our life together. Everything we do should have purpose. This is a value that I've taken on. And I believe it's an ideal for us as a church to experience on Sundays. Because everything that we do can be used to give God glory. It's the reason why I've subscribed to the concept that this time that we have on Sundays, it cannot just simply be a landing spot for us. Yes, it's important to have all the things, the coffee and the music and the messages, and that things go right and that the lights are turned on. That's all important. But at the end of the day, if we're not working toward creating a launching pad for our people, we're missing an opportunity to understand what does it mean that everything that we do matters. That there's intention behind, there needs to be intention behind everything that we do on Sundays. There needs to be intention in everything that we do with our neighbors and our friends and our workplaces. There has to be something behind it, and we have to work toward that. We have to practice that because it's not just going to happen.
Right. I mean, when I'm looking out at all of your awesome faces,
Half faces.
half faces, as handsome and beautiful as they are,
I like your eyes.
I am struck with the fact that many of you have been found on our serving schedule that goes out on a weekly basis. So you know what I am talking about. And it's very easy to get lost in just making Sunday happen. But what happens when we look at our Sunday morning experience from a different perspective? And that is really, the intent behind everything that we do. As Pastor Zach said, that it is an act of worship that points back to God, or at least has the potential to point back to God. And whether that is leading worship, or serving in kids ministry, or serving the coffee, or greeting outside, or cleaning the space, all of those things are an act of worship. And because of that, there is no component of our service that is ranked higher than another. There is nothing that is more valuable than anything else, because it's all an act of service. They're all equal. And as we approach thinking about people serving in different areas, I just want to make it clear, it is not about getting a warm body in a space so that we can have coffee. We've figured out that we can do a lot. We can make a service happen without a lot of things.
I can do it all in my basement, actually.
Zach can do it all in his basement.
Believe it or not.
Which we all experienced for several months. It isn't about making Sundays happen or filling the space, but it is an opportunity for us to practice or lean into the gifts that we have been given so that we can turn around and use those gifts the rest of the week.
Yeah, this conversation is so important. And what Rachel is saying is just really important. That so many times churches can get in the mindset of all we have to do is just pull Sunday off. And what are the different components to pull Sunday off? Well, we need someone to lead the songs. We need somebody to change the slides. We need someone to make the coffee. We need someone to hang out with our kids and walk with them in the gospel. We need someone to teach. Like, all these are like little check marks. But at the end of the day, if it's just to lift up our church, like, is that really what we're supposed to be doing? Like, to give us glory? I'm pretty sure that that's not how it works. Sundays, we believe, well, whether you're serving or participating, like, Sundays are a way for us to equip you. Not to make sure that we can check boxes off so that we just get the stuff done that we need to do in order to make Sundays happen. No, Sundays, in our estimation, is a way to equip you to be the church in the world. As people who trust God, as people who focus on loving others well, as people who are intent on joining with God in the mission of God in our community. That is what we want to do. We want to equip you to do that. Because at the end of the day, if it's just on Sunday, and if all we're doing is meeting here online, and that's the end-all, be-all, like, great. But is that enough for us? We believe that the mission of God is not for us to land in a spot, but it's a movement. And we want to use this time, specifically in this time on Sundays, to act as a launching pad, to equip you here to go somewhere else.
Yeah, I'm sitting here trying to think how long ago it was. Oh my goodness, probably 15 plus years ago, maybe almost 20. Oh my goodness.
Was it the 90s?
I don't even remember the decade it was in because I can't remember how many years ago it was. But I was approached to do the welcome on a Sunday morning. And I remember distinctly receiving that phone call and thinking the person that asked me to do it was absolutely insane because they killed it at it. And I was like, why in the world would you want me to fill in when you're so good at it? And I was so nervous to do it that I actually created like tag board notes and brought them up with me and made some joke about it while they were up there. But I was so nervous doing it. And yet, had I not been asked to do it, I never would have discovered things about myself that I needed to discover. And that is part of this experience. I mean, everybody having a unique set of gifts. And we fully understand that there are seasons in life where it might take just everything you have to leave your house and show up and serve. And that jumping in and getting involved isn't where you are at. And I have definitely been there, where I needed to just come and kind of feel like the Sunday experience was a warm hug for my soul. And I've definitely needed that. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. If you find yourself in that season, please know that it is our honor and privilege to pray with you. And Tony does a beautiful job of orchestrating all of the prayers that come in. And prayer really is a huge, huge component of the River Church. So please know, in saying this, we're not saying, well, sorry if life's hard, we want you to do these things. That's not it at all. We really do understand that. But if it is that time for you, serving is an investment in your faith walk. And if you have the ability to practice and use your gifts in a safe space, we really look at that like that's just a benefit for all of the people who are going to meet you the rest of the week. Oops.
Yeah, we want to see this as like a laboratory where we're experimenting. This isn't like a perfect experience, and I'm going to be straight up with that. But we're not perfect people, and we have to embrace that. We want to use this time to experiment. Maybe some of you are like, hey, I've never sung before in front of people. And Sean will be like, cool, I'll get you in a spot where you can sing. Maybe you want to greet. Maybe you want to figure out how can I be nicer to people. Honestly, my wife, all the time, she's like, I wish I could be nicer. I'm like, you need to be a greeter then, because their job is to be nice. But like, there are things that you can experiment with here that allow you to grow and to change and to think about things in a different way. Mm-hmm. This is so important for us because we want to equip you. We're not trying to fit you into spots that just make us look good. We're trying to give you the tools, walk with you in these areas to say, do you want to try this? We're not expecting perfection. We want to see what you can do. And that's really what we're leading with here is on Sundays, we want to have this as just a participatory experience where you get to try stuff out that you might not be good at. And that God's calling you to do something different and say like, hey, yeah, this is what I want to do. We want to walk with you on Sundays to do that. But the reality is, maybe it's not on Sundays. And then how can we participate with you? And that's really what Rachel's role is going forward is how do we do this beyond Sundays?
Right. I mean, Sunday is not a day to show off everything that we know or everything that we have practiced. It's not, that is not at all what we are looking at Sunday. It is not about perfection, but it is an act of worship. And we do take that seriously. We want to put our best foot forward. We want to take time to practice and develop our skills so that we're not a distraction and so that those people who do join us are able to experience, the gathering in the way that they need to. We don't want a church full of specialists. That's something that Zach said, and I really did appreciate that. But if we would look at this as an investment, an opportunity for us to grow and to learn and to discover so that we can bring this space to the people who are never going to enter this space.
So what you're going to start seeing more and more is our exploration, our experimenting of how do we connect you, us, into things greater than you and us. That's one of the challenges that I put on in front of Rachel to say, like, okay, if we're not connecting with people on Sundays, if we want to connect beyond Sundays, if it's not just about filling spots with warm bodies, like, how can we take steps to be the church in different ways? And that's really where we've gotten in our Feeding 50. It's really to say, what can we as a church do with the resources that we have that glorifies God beyond this space on Sundays?
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, the Feeding 50 concept, and I just want to say this because this is why it's so important that we all work together. When we were talking about ways that we can connect one another, I mean, we had a very generic term, which was a community meal. I mean, yes, it does make sense that that is what it is, but Kate and her brain and the way that her brain works, she's like, I can't call it that. I can't call it a community meal. It has to have a different name. And she's like, I'm going to call it Feeding 50. And then she did the logo with the things, the skills that she has, and I'm like, that's so cool. Because the thing is yes, you could pull off serving 50 people a hot meal almost single-handedly or with a small group of people, but what fun is there in that? I mean, each person in this space has unique gifts and a unique perspective in how they, experience God, and it's so important that that is what is brought to the outside community, beyond this space. And so that's what excites me so much about the Feeding 50, concept, is that we need everybody's gifts to be represented, whether it's worship or whether, it's shepherding or, just a really great idea for a really cool name or what the space looks like. All of these things are opportunities for us to love other people well by what they experience when they come. And that does really excite me. That is connection that I'm like, okay, I can fully get behind that. And you might be sitting here thinking, I see the ways that you guys serve on Sunday, and I don't know, I'm not really drawn to any of those things, but I'm really interested in this. Let us know that. I will say a really great women's Bible study started out of that concept, and I'm so glad that it did. So don't be afraid to speak up and to share ideas that you have, because we're not going to do it all right or well, and we need everyone's participation.
Yeah. So there are takeaways that we want for you. One, that this is a space that we practice loving people, the sovereignty of God, trusting the sovereignty of God, loving people well, and joining with God on God's mission in our community. Like that, we want Sundays to be a space where we practice what we preach. But we also want to be really clear. We can't do faith for you. We can't do the work of Jesus that God has, that the Lord has called you to do. Right. We can't do that for you. But we as a team, Rachel, myself, Sean, Tony, our elders, we have a mandate. Through the text in Ephesians 4, Paul writes to the Ephesians, very clearly stating, apostles, prophets, evangelists, shepherds, teachers, they are to not do the work of the saints, but to equip the saints for the work of God. That is our role. And we want to be really clear. Like Joanne coming to us and saying, like, yeah, if you get, I have this idea of doing a study. You want to do the study? And we're like, we don't do that. We'll equip you to do it, make it happen. The Feeding 50 stuff, like, it's a team of people that, it's not Rachel putting this on, it's the church doing this. Why? Because only when the church decides that it wants to do it, can it do it.
And can it be sustainable?
Absolutely.
And impact others.
So we want to practice, but we also want to equip, specifically on Sundays. That's where we're aimed at. That's what we're trying to do as a team. So when you hear like us inviting you in, engaging in different ways, it's not because we want to be not doing our jobs. No, but our job is to equip. Number one, our job is to equip, you all to be the church. That is so vitally important for us to understand. And it's so important for us to understand on Sundays. We have to practice it because it's not going to happen.
Right? I mean, there is no idea or task or area of service that is too small or irrelevant. Our lives and what flows out of us has the privilege of honoring and glorifying God, to point back to Him. And it really is our great joy to walk this road with you so that when you do leave this space, you can be the very, very best version of who God sees you to be, not who you see yourself to be, because who He sees us to be is so significantly better. And that's exciting.
I want to pray those words over you just before we do communion, because these words are great that Rachel has written, / just said. I'm going to do what you wrote.
Okay, sure.
But just listen to these words. Pray these words in your own way. No idea or task or area of service is too small or irrelevant for you, O God. Our lives and what flows out of us has the privilege, the awesome privilege and responsibility to point back to you for your glory. And it is our great joy to be able to walk together in practicing those gifts. So when we leave this space, we are more pointed toward being the light on the hill, that we can grow where we are planted and grow fruit where we're planted. Lord, we just ask you to cover our church. Allow us a spirit of practice and engagement for a faith that you have given us, a heart and a calling that you have given us, God. Lord, we're so thankful for an opportunity just to have conversation about what you are calling us as a church to be and to do. Lord, we give you thanks and praise this day. We ask all of this in your Son's holy name. Amen.